After about a decade, Stranger Things is about to release its fifth and final season in a few days. And as an 80s kid, you know, my little nostalgia gremlin is just starting to wake up. I'm excited to see how it all finishes. And it also felt like a good time to talk about books that have a similar feeling to Stranger Things. And so today on Paperback Journeys, we're going to be diving into my top 10 books which feel like Stranger Things. I'm intentionally not going to be including the Stranger Things books, right? So books like Suspicious Minds, Runaway Max, and The Flight of Icarus. I'm going to be talking about books that are outside of the Stranger Things universe that just kind of feel like Stranger Things in some way. Are there going to be Stephen King books on this list? You better believe it, baby. And so let's get started with the first book, and that is My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. I mean, you can tell by the cover that when I say this book feels like Stranger Things, I am correct. Let me just try and focus that right now. Let me hide my face. Hopefully it'll focus. There you go, look at that. I mean, come on. This whole book is drenched with nostalgic 1980s vibes, the fashion, the movies, the slang, the music, and I think it really nails that small town high school energy so well. You can basically hear the synthesized music playing in the background when you're reading this book. This book kind of feels a little bit like Mean Girls if some of the characters were possessed by the demon from The Exorcist. It's kind of like a combination of those two. It's set in 1988 in a small South Carolina town, and it follows two best friends. You've got Abby and Gretchen, and they've known each other since grade school. And one night, they head to this lake house party with the rest of their group, and things get a little bit reckless. They mess around with a Ouija board. There's some LSD involved, and Gretchen sort of disappears for a while. And when she comes back, you know, something's different. And over the next few weeks, Abby starts noticing that her friend isn't really herself anymore. Gretchen seems distant and she's snapping at her parents. She's actually changing physically, and she's radiating this mean, nasty, unsettling energy. I read this book along with the PBJ book club, and I'd say the reactions were pretty mixed. Some of the people really liked how light and fun it was. It was a quick, easy read, but it never really leaned too far into the horror. It never became scary. It was quite funny in places, and I would say even playful. But underneath all of like the 1980s nostalgia, there's a story about friendship, about staying loyal to someone who's slipping away, and how messy friendships can be in high school. Also, there's this kind of like 1980s set dressing, I would call it. You know, they're going to roller rinks. They're obsessed with E.T. Also, the chapters have the chapters are all titled by 1980s songs. So this one's called Broken Wings. You've got One Thing Leads to Another. Let's try and find another one. It's the End of the World as We Know It, and I Feel Fine. So yeah, it's just constantly reminding you of, do you remember the 80s? Do you remember the 80s? And even if you wasn't there, if you like Stranger Things, you kind of get the idea. But yeah, I've just got to give one more shout out to this cover design. I think this is one of the most creative covers that I've seen. And actually, it's about 50% of the reason that I bought the book. It looks like a worn out VHS tape. You know, you can see even like the faded colors and the way that at the tops, I thought that I actually got a damaged copy, but no, this is actually intentional. This is because this is what VHS boxes used to look like. They were all kind of ruined at the edges. And I think that this cover really captures the spirit of the book. So yeah, just a bit of fun, a bit of light-hearted fun. But let's talk about another book, which isn't so much fun, is actually quite scary. And that is It by Stephen King. Another phenomenal cover, I've got to say. Just nice minimalist cover. So the Duffer Brothers, who created Stranger Things, have stated multiple times how foundational Stephen King's books were to the inspiration and creation of Stranger Things. They're very open about it. And also in the first couple of seasons, you see all of Stephen King's books just kind of strewn about the place. You see a state trooper that's reading Cujo, and later Lucas is reading The Talisman. And so, yeah, of course, Stephen King's going to be featured on this list, and this is one of those books. At its core, this is a story about a monster, or I think more accurately, an ancient evil that preys on children in the small town of Derry, Maine. Every few decades, this thing resurfaces. And this time, when it does, a group of outcast kids that call themselves the Losers Club, they kind of all band together and decide that they're going to take on this evil. The book kind of blends supernatural elements and horror and coming of age themes and childhood trauma. I think it's very easy to draw parallels between it and Stranger Things. On the surface, Derry, Maine, and also Hawkins, Indiana, they look like these just nice, ordinary small towns, but both of them have something very dark that's happening underneath the surface, something that's rotting away at the town. And the adults are all oblivious to it, and so it falls on the kids to face the darkness alone. And again, there's all these little sprinkles of childhood in there that a lot of us are going to be familiar with. Riding around on your bikes, using walkie-talkies to speak to each other, little secret hideouts that only you and your friends know about, and that sort of sense of friendship that's forged through shared experiences, whether that be adventure or fear, but sort of like growing closer together and supporting each other. This is easily, I would say, one of my top 3 Stephen King novels of all time. It is a beast of a book. Look at that. That is almost the width of my head, and my head is massive. But the good thing about having a book that's this long is Stephen King is just very good at developing characters, and you spend so much time with these characters that by the end you genuinely love them. I'll say one more thing as well. Outside of all the supernatural stuff, the bullies in this book are brutal. There's one character called Patrick Hockstetter. If you're not familiar with him, just be ready. Just be ready, because every time he was in a scene, he made my skin crawl. I was like, get this kid away from me. So the next one, I actually read this book quite recently. I think it was just last month that I read it. And that book is Intercepts by T.J. Payne. So this story follows a character called Joe Gerhard, who works at a top secret government facility where human beings are being used as experimental antennas. So it's a pretty dark opening. These subjects are placed in extreme sensory deprivation. So they can't see, they can't hear, they can't smell, they can't taste, and they can't even feel the room that they're in. If they're laying down on the bed, they can't feel the bed. They can't feel the walls. They're just basically floating around in an endless, limitless black. And this book opens with the POV of one of those test subjects, and the experience that they're having really was uncomfortable to read. It was actually one of the most uncomfortable openings to any book that I've read. It's just like the prologue. It's just a few pages, but I was kind of, oh man, this is like a new fear has been unlocked, you know, like not being able to sense anything. It's not something I even considered before. And so, yeah, you've got this main character called Joe. His personal life is kind of a mess, honestly. His ex-wife has recently passed away. She committed suicide. And so she's left behind their teenage daughter, Riley, and now Riley has to move in with him. They're kind of like not that close, really, because of the nature of his job and the secrecy surrounding it. And it's not long after she arrives that Riley starts to have all of these terrifying visions of a woman that's appearing in her bedroom and following her around and just doing these horrific, gory, disturbing things. I would say that this book sits somewhere between horror and sci-fi and also thriller. It's very graphic. It's heavy on body horror, and it's filled with morally grey characters. So there's no, I wouldn't say there's any real heroes that you get to root for in this. It's just varying shades of messed up. If you've ever wondered what it would be like to see Stranger Things from inside the Hawkins lab, from the people that are actually running the experiments on the kids rather than the kids themselves trying to escape, then I think this would be an interesting angle for you to read. The next book I actually don't have a physical copy of, and that is The Saturday Night Ghost Club by Craig Davidson. So if you haven't heard of Craig Davidson before, this is actually the real name of Nick Cutter. So if you've ever read The Troop, The Deep, or Little Heaven, then this book is from the same guy. But I think the vibe with this book is totally different. It's way more YA friendly, more nostalgic, more lighthearted. And I feel like when he writes under Nick Cutter, it's very intense and graphic. When I read The Troop, it was some of the sickest stuff I've ever read. I bloody loved it. I guess that must make me a sicko, man. Ooh, I'm crazy. I hate when people pretend to be crazy. Anyway, so The Saturday Night Ghost Club is set again in the 1980s, right? You're noticing a familiar theme maybe with these books. And it takes place in a slightly odd, slightly haunted little town that is near Niagara Falls. And the main character is this 12-year-old boy named Jake Baker, and he's on summer vacation. He's a little bit of a loner, and his closest friend is actually his eccentric Uncle Calvin. Uncle Calvin is a really interesting character. I'd say he's probably the best character in this book. He runs this quirky little shop that's filled with these curiosities. So you've got these old trinkets, these relics, maybe even there's a couple of cursed objects. You're not sure if they're actually cursed or not. And he is obsessed with conspiracies and the paranormal. He's even got this special phone line that only receives calls. He can't make calls outside of the shop, but he can receive calls from other conspiracy theorists who tell him all about alien sightings and strange phenomena. So they've got this sort of weird little network of conspiracy theorists. And naturally, Jake just gets swept up into his uncle's world. As the summer vacation goes on, Jake starts to make these new friends, and together, along with Uncle Calvin, they start the Saturday Night Ghost Club. And every week they pick a local spot in and around their town with an urban legend attached to it. So there's a haunted tunnel. I think that was maybe one of the best scenes in it. There's this haunted tunnel. There's an abandoned graveyard, and they just go exploring. I think on the surface, this seems like it's pretty lighthearted. They're a bunch of kids and their uncle chasing ghost stories, learning little bits of town folklore, making memories together. But there's also this undercurrent and this sense that something deeper and sadder is haunting all of the actions that they're taking. It's definitely not a scary book. It's more about friendship and that kind of bittersweet magic of childhood summers where things get a little bit spooky sometimes. But yeah, it's not scary in the same way that it is scary. Listen, I couldn't make this list in good conscience without including the OG, the one that, in my opinion, started it all. And that is Something Wicked, This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. So if Stephen King was the inspiration for Stranger Things, then Ray Bradbury was one of the inspirations for Stephen King's works. This story takes place in the fictional town of Greentown, Illinois, where a couple of teenage boys called Will Holloway and Jim Nightshade are gearing up for Halloween, and they've heard all about this carnival that's rolling into town. Everyone's all excited about this carnival, but there's something in their childhood intuition, like something in their gut that's telling them something about this carnival feels wrong, even before it arrives. And one day, a lightning rod salesman named Tom Fury shows up. And yeah, by the way, the names, the names in this book are pretty wild. You know, you've got Jim Nightshade. Imagine if you had a friend called Jim Nightshade. You got Jim Nightshade, you got Tom Fury, there's a guy called Mr. Dark, and they sound over the top, but I think in a way Bradbury kind of makes him work perfectly. Anyway, Tom Fury warns the boys that there's a storm coming, and then the carnival arrives in the dead of night, and the carnival kind of, without spoiling anything, it kind of it feeds on human weakness, and it tempts people with their secret desires, and it has a way of setting traps for them. I think what I loved most about this book is how well it captures that strange moment in childhood when you start crossing the line into adolescence and the world suddenly feels bigger and a bit more dangerous. Also, Bradbury's writing, it sort of feels like autumn. It smells like burning leaves and dewy grass and candy apples. And actually, someone on the Paperback Journeys Discord said, and I can't remember their name, but I'm going to put it up on the screen now, but they said recently that when they read Ray Bradbury, they can smell colours, which I think is a very accurate and poetic way of describing Ray Bradbury's writing. Yeah, that's good. That's good. I wish I thought of that, actually. Damn it. Like many of the stories on this list, this one sits firmly in the kids on bikes camp, children who can sense evil creeping into their town whilst adults remain oblivious. And it's got a really good cast of characters too. Mr. Dark, like I mentioned, he's also known as the Illustrated Man. He runs the show. Then you've got Mr. Cougar, who rides a time-twisting carousel. You've got the Dust Witch, which I think a lot of people find to be the scariest character in this book. She's this like blind fortune teller that drifts through the story like a nightmare, and each one of them represents some distorted human desire, whether that be envy or vanity or fear of aging, and together they create this like haunting, dreamlike horror that still feels timeless when you read it. Next up is The Fisherman by John Langan. So this one, I think, if you've read it, you might think to yourself, this is a little bit of an odd pick for the list, but hear me out. Hear me out about this one. If you love the scenes in Stranger Things where they're creeping through the upside down and those moments that are filled with a kind of eerie otherness, a cosmic dread, then you're probably going to appreciate this kind of a story, because it sounds like what you're craving is cosmic horror. And this is one of the best cosmic horrors that I've read in a while. It starts off with a man named Abe who's just reeling from the loss of his wife. Grief has totally hollowed him out from the inside. And so he, as a way to distract himself, turns to the hobby of fishing. And then later on, after he starts fishing, he notices that one of his colleagues, Dan, just seems completely out of it. And he realizes that Dan has also suffered a devastating loss. And although he doesn't know him very well, he kind of takes him under his wing and he says, all right, listen, come fishing with me. And so they have this kind of friendship that starts from that shared grief. And they start talking about fishing trips around upstate New York, and they're just losing themselves in the ritual of it all, you know, getting the right rods, the right baits, the quiet and the stillness where they can reflect on life. And they do all of this as a way to heal themselves and also to heal one another. So I know at this point you're kind of thinking, well, this doesn't really sound very much like Stranger Things. Stay with me a little bit. And then one day on a roadside diner near the Catskills, they overhear talk of this secret little spot called Dutchman's Creek. And supposedly it's this remote fishing location with a very strange and maybe supernatural reputation. Now, I'm not going to spoil this in any way, but I'll just say this. You should go into this expecting a full novella in the middle of the book. So this is the original story. All right, now we're in the novella. All right, now we're back to the story. So there is a novella inside of the book. If you go into it expecting that, I think you're going to have a lot of fun. If you're not expecting that, like I wasn't, then it could, for some people, be a little bit challenging, because when I got into the kind of novella in the middle of the book, I kept turning the pages thinking, all right, so this is just going to be a couple of pages. All right, so now we're going to get back to the original story. What happened? What happened to the original story? You can kind of get lost in it like that. So, if you go into it expecting that, then I think you're going to enjoy it a lot more. And also, the two stories kind of weave together very well. So, just expect that. I think this book absolutely earns its place on the list because it captures that feeling of the ordinary everyday colliding with the monstrous and the unfathomable, the sort of mystical bleeding into your daily life, strange creatures that are lurking beyond human perception, and there's a constant creeping dread that's just getting bigger and closer and more involved in your life. I talk about this book all the time, and that's because it just really stuck with me. It's literary horror, and it's done right. It's slow, it's thoughtful, it's devastating, and you just need to go in with the right expectations, and I think it's going to hit you pretty hard. A lot of people like this book. The next book on the list is Summer of Night by Dan Simmons. So this book is set in the early 1960s. Again, we're in a sleepy little town in America, and right at the center of everything is this like old school building that it's just been there for seemingly forever. And its origins are a little bit mysterious and confusing. It feels as though the town has been wrapped around this school. And the school is called Old Central. And the opening, I think it's like the prologue, really describes everything in detail. The dark, dim corridors, the creepy basement with a little leaky faucet, and the hidden rooms. And it has actually that same eerie energy from the opening of The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. You can tell from the very first pages that something is wrong with this place, and it feels like Old Central is somehow infecting the town. And from the beginning of the book, we learn that this is the last day that the school will ever be open. The kids are just kind of waiting for summer vacation to start. They're looking up at the clock. They're just desperate for the summer to come, and they know that they're never going to have to sit in these classrooms ever again. When summer's over, they're going to be starting at a brand new school, and it's just going to feel a bit more light and breezy. It's not going to feel like this old creepy place anymore. But just before they leave, just as the bell goes and they all go running out into the playground and running to their homes, the school claims one last victim. And it leaves the boys in this story with one last mystery to solve. And they spend all of their summer digging into the history of Old Central, trying to uncover what happened to their missing classmate. Lots of people, I think rightfully so, compare this book to It. It makes a lot of sense. The similarities are very obvious. If you're just going to read one, if you're just going to read either It or Summer of Night, then I would say choose It. I think It by Stephen King is better, but there are some moments in Summer of Night which are in some ways darker than what Stephen King wrote. Yeah, there was kind of unexpected scenes for me. They're both really good though. And if you are planning on reading both, then definitely don't read them back to back, because they're a bit too similar. And I think it might feel, if you read them in too close a proximity to one another, you might feel as though you're just reading the same story twice. But yeah, if you're a Stephen King fan and you've already read It, then this one will probably scratch your Stephen King itch, because it's genuinely creepy. There's cornfields, there's strange creatures, there's some gruesome death scenes. I think one of my favorite things about Stranger Things is seeing regular suburban kids face something that's just way bigger than them and way more dangerous than them. And the ways that they kind of like lean on each other and their own individual experiences and their own key strengths, so that they can, when they lean on one another, it's like they all become more than the sum of their parts. And that's what this book kind of feels like as well. The next book on the list is The Institute by Stephen King. Honestly, so you might be going, oh, another Stephen King. There are so many Stephen King books that I could put on this list, by the way. I could have had Firestarter. I could have had The Talisman. I could have had The Body, Dreamcatcher, The Outsider, Salem's Lot. And so I did my very best to try and keep things as trimmed down as possible. But this one sort of feels impossible to avoid. This story follows a kid by the name of Luke Ellis, who's right on the cusp of becoming a teenager. And this kid is a full-on genius, and he just wants a normal life. He wants to go to high school, wants to blend in. But then one night, these people in these kind of like dark clothes and masks all break into his house. They drug him so that he doesn't wake up, and then they kill his parents. They drag him out of bed. They shove him into the back of an SUV. He's completely unconscious at this point, and they take him to this creepy hidden facility that is packed with other kids that are similar to him in a way, because they have psychic abilities. Some of them are telepathic, some of them have telekinesis, that sort of thing. And so you can probably already tell where I'm going with this one. There's a lot of parallels to draw between this and the plot line of 11 and her kind of like origin story. The Institute feels like a darker, more clinical version of Her World. It's got like the same setup, these disturbing adults that are running experiments on children. They're pushing them to their limits to see what they can do. They're treating them as tools rather than humans. And it kind of hints at how these abilities could maybe be used as weapons as well. There's also that kind of panic and that urge to escape and find some adult outside who might be able to listen to them and believe them, and that pressure of time running out. So yeah, very similar to 11's storyline. And just like Stranger Things, it kind of hits that conspiracy itch, secret organizations, shady motives, people pulling strings where no one can see. I think, fans of Stranger Things would love The Institute. The funny thing is with this book in particular is that whereas a lot of these books feel as though they're inspiration for Stranger Things, this book actually feels as though it was inspired by Stranger Things. It came out after the show was already up and running a few seasons in. So it does feel as though Stephen King said, all right, you borrow from me, I'll borrow from you, and I think that's fair enough. Next up is Meddling Kids by Edgar Cantero. So this thing is basically the cast of Scooby-Doo, but they're all grown up. So you've got this group of former teen detectives who solved a big monster case years ago, and now they're adults and they're starting to look back and they're thinking, hang on a minute, that probably didn't go down exactly how we thought it did. Something darker happened than we remember. And when they reunite, you get all of the banter and all of the baggage and old friendships trying to reform around the cracks that were made. Everyone's circling the same painful memories, and you can feel how the past has sort of like left a stain on them. And on top of all of that, you've got proper monsters. You've got eldritch stuff, things hiding underwater, entities whispering in people's dreams. It's a little bit pulpy, but I think it knows exactly what it is. When these people all talk to one another about their past, it's got that sort of like sitting around a campfire, trying to creep each other out vibe to it, I think that's what we're going to get a lot of when we get this final season of Stranger Things 2. I think we're going to be looking back on how far the gang have come, everything that they've survived, the people that they've lost, and they're just going to be sitting with those moments and just thinking back. I think it's going to be heavy on feelings and there's going to be a couple of shocking moments, and I'm ready for it, and I'm excited for it. But just before I give you the next book, I want to thank all of my Patreon members for supporting this channel. A big thank you to the cult members, a massive thank you to the named men, and an extra special thank you to the quartet. All of you make this channel possible, and I'm so glad that we get to build this reading community together. Seriously, thanks so much for being a part of it. And if you like this channel and you'd like to support it and get some perks like the Metallic Paperback Journeys bookmark, access to some of the exclusive rooms on the Discord server, and also access to the PBJ Book Club, then you can click on the link in the description below. And so I feel like every book that I've talked about on this list has an element of Stranger Things that is kind of baked into it. So you've got The Fisherman, which has that otherworldly parallel universe creepiness. Then Saturday Night Ghost Club nails that found family kind of thing. Intercepts and The Institute both give you that the kind of creepy labs that experiment on kids and open doors that shouldn't be opened. And then with It and Summer of Night, they've got that kids on bikes, small town America, summertime heartbeat to it. But this next one takes every single one of those ingredients and wraps them up in one enormous saga. And that series is The Dark Tower by, you wouldn't believe it, Stephen King. So why does this belong on the Stranger Things list? I can't go too deep into this series without spoiling things, obviously, but this is Stephen King's magnum opus. It starts with this dreamlike, slightly confusing, at the bottom here, gunslinger. That's the first book in the series. I've got to put this down. It's too heavy. It's too heavy. I think, once again, if the thing that you liked most about Stranger Things is the Upside Down, then huge chunks of this series are going to feel like you're wandering through that exact kind of space. Some books, I would say, basically just live there. The kind of worlds that are featured in The Dark Tower and all of the distortions and the strange echoes, you're going to recognize the feeling. You're going to notice it right away. There's also this line that a lot of fans of The Dark Towers will always think about, which is there are other worlds than these. That comes very early in the first book. And that is I think that is the whole thing. It's parallel universes everywhere. The original series is 8 books long, but I actually went through the entire extended multiverse of The Dark Tower, which includes a whole bunch of Stephen King's other novels. It was 24 books in total, and on this channel, I took a journey. I reviewed every single one, did like a spoiler review for every single one of the 24 books of the multiverse, and I talked through all of the connections between the books. So if you ever think to yourself, you know what, I've read a little bit of Stephen King in the past, or maybe you haven't read any Stephen King, and you just want to dive into his whole catalogue with some bald British guy that's sort of joining you along the journey, then you're welcome to join me, and you can start that journey by clicking up here. Anyway, thanks so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. I hope that you're looking forward to Stranger Things as much as I am, and as always, happy reading.